Torah portion. I'd like to first look at 3 comments from the Baal HaTurim. What did I say? 3? Yeah, 3 comments from the Baal HaTurim. After that, I'd like to look at 4 comments from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and then comments from Moshe Feinstein. And after that, if we have time, we have some other beautiful comments. So I'm not so ambitious that I think that we can get through all of this. So we'll go slowly to try and do everything slowly. The first is we're dealing with Chayei Sarah. We have expressions. We have some probably most significant discussion of death in the Torah, and burial for death is in portion of Chayei Sarah. So let's start by looking first at the second verse, where it says, "And Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron in the land of Canaan, and Abraham came to eulogize for Sarah. V'tamat Sarah b'Kiryat Arba hi Hebron be'eretz Canaan. V'yavo Abraham l'spod l'Sarah v'livkota." Abraham came to eulogize for Sarah and to cry for her. Hold on one second. So, in this context, people wonder, and I don't know if somebody asked me. I know Jill asked me, but I think she asked me after the class ended last week. Why is it that the chaf on the liv kota, why is it smaller? That if you look at the Torah, the liv kota is smaller. Oh, by the way, one more thing. I expect, God willing, next Tuesday morning to finish the 6th Torah that I'm writing, then on to the 7th. So you'll wish me a big shkoyach when you see me in person. That is a big monument, big milestone in my life. Each Torah takes 1,000 hours. And the reason why I mention it is because the things that always jump out at me is which letters are written small, which letters are written large. So why is this letter of Liv Kota written small? Why is the chaf of Liv Kota written small? This is something that Michael Stern always used to talk to me about. Michael Stern of blessed memory. He always used to comment on these textual, these scriptural, these scribal oddities. So the Baal HaTurim almost always comments on them, and he comments on the scribal oddities that we notice and even the ones we don't notice. So he says, why is the letter small? First of all, Shelo Bacha El Ma'at, that he only cried a little bit for her. Why did he only cry a little bit for her? Because Rashi, Baal HaTurim says Lafishes Keina Haita, because she was older. What does that mean? It means that she had lived a full life. That if a person lives a full life and they're not Rahman al cut down as a baby or as a younger person, it's always sad, but it's the loss is felt, but it's the way of the world. So therefore, the crying is supposed to be less. That's what the Baal HaTurim says. The Rokeach, who's the Rokeach? So the Baal HaTurim is writing in the 14th century, end of the 14th century, or in the 14th century. There is a commentary called the Rokeach, was a little bit earlier than the Baal HaTurim. In Germany, he died in 1217. He has a different explanation. He says that the lives of Sarah and Jacob were linked in several ways. They were the first and last of the patriarchs and the matriarchs to be buried in the cave of the Machpelah. And when God renamed Jacob, he renamed him Yisrael after Sarah, both names indicating Sarah authority. Yet despite this, Sarah lived to 127 years, which was 20 years less than Jacob, who lived to be 147 years. To underscore the difference, the Torah uses a small chaf. Chaf is a numerical value of 20. So that's what the Baal HaTurim says, that is a numerical value of chaf of 20 is to tell us that Jacob lived 20 more years than Sarah, even though they had a lot of similarities. I'm going to just pause for a moment and share with you something that I learned last night from at our Rashi class. Every day we do a Rashi study, and that's at a half hour for Mincha. We do it in person online. And yesterday I asked the question, what's the origin of the term Am Yisrael Chai? This has become like a national anthem for the Jewish people, from the most ultra Orthodox to the most left, liberal, secular Jew. People know this idea of Am Yisrael Chai. It's become an anthem of the Jewish people. But this phrase, first of all, if people here heard this phrase, have you heard the phrase Am Yisrael Chai? Yeah, so people have heard the phrase Am Yisrael Chai, means the nation of the Israel lives. So I was thinking about this. First of all, where does this phrase even come from? I was thinking about that a lot. Where does the phrase even come from? It's certainly not in the Bible. It's certainly not in the Talmud. And then even the phrase Am Yisrael itself, that seems almost a modern phrase. Am Yisrael, the people of Israel. In the rabbis, they refer to it as Bnei Yisrael, or the Yehudim, the Yidden. But the Am Yisrael seems to be something that's nationalistic, which seems to be starting like in the modern period where we start talking about nationhood. Am Yisrael. So Stanley, you have a comment? Hold on one second. Let me just pause the recording. It's without question that what made this phrase a household phrase was when Jacob Birnbaum, who was one of the leaders of the Soviet Jewry movement, asked Shlomo Carlebach to take the words Am Yisrael Chai and turn it into a song. And if you look at Rabbi Avi Weiss's book, Open Up the Iron Door, Rabbi Weiss has a picture of Shlomo Carlebach playing that song for the very, very first time, and it was actually recorded by a man named Nathan Fisher, who recorded it for the first time. But that song, that tune of Shlomo Carlebach, is what made it famous. But why did Jacob Birnbaum ask him to take this song and make it famous? Where else was the song used? So if you look online, you'll see unsourced a couple of other mythologies around it, one is that after the Jews were liberated from Bergen-Belsen, the rabbi who was there, I forget his name, shouted out, Am Yisrael Chai, to the Jews of Bergen-Belsen. But that's also perhaps apocryphal, because it's hard to imagine that he spoke to them in Hebrew. Mostly they probably spoke Yiddish. So why would he speak to them in Hebrew? So it's probably apocryphal. And then there's another story, which is possibly apocryphal, that when possibly did happen. And when Golda Meir went to the Soviet Union in 1948 to talk to the Jews, they greeted her with the phrase Am Yisrael Chai. That's a story that's told. But these are stories that don't really tell us about the origin of the phrase, because the phrase, somebody would have to invent this phrase for this rabbi in Bergen-Belsen, and it's one of the most powerful phrases. Where did it come from? So then Rabbi Yosef Goldman yesterday at the Rashi class referred me to a article, actually Wikipedia, which tells a story, which is also almost certainly apocryphal, about Rabbi Yonason Eibeshitz, he was a rabbi, and the story tells about him in the 18th century. He was one of probably the leading rabbi of his generation. He used to write amulets, which are called kamiot, and he was accused by Rabbi Yaakov Emden of actually being a secret follower of Shabtai Tzvi. That's just background. So anyway, the story is told that the nobleman, the duke of the area where Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz lived, which was Metz, which was Metz, he accused him of, he said that we're going to expel all the Jews of Metz. So Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz came to him and beseeched him, and the Duke said, no, we're not going to listen to you. We don't care. We're expelling all the Jews. And so Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz responded with the phrase, you might think you're expelling us, but Am Yisrael Chai L'Olmei Ad. Am Yisrael is going to live forever and ever. Am Yisrael will live eternally. So when the Duke received this, the Duke responded back to him, okay, you know what? There's 45,760 Jews in this area. I'll tell you what, if you could come back to me in 1 hour with that phrase on a piece of parchment the size of a mezuzah, then I'll let the Jews stay. So Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz came back an hour later, and the only way I can explain this, describe this, is like a, like you sometimes have those word finds where you have little words written down, like a lot of letters together, and you have to find the word. So he wrote this Am Yisrael Chai so many different ways within that word find. Am Yisrael Chai may add 45,760 times how you could spell it. And it's obviously like a mathematical, whoever figured that out, it must have been a mathematical genius. And so that's the story about how he say this. That's apocryphal, dating back to the 18th century. But I think from there, that was Kabbalistic, that there must have been this phrase that was taken into Kabbalistic lore. And from there, it must be that the phrase became powerful and popular, that the Jews were able to live despite all the odds. So anyway, that's a little tangent, because we have the name Yisrael here indicating that he was able to live. So, okay, back to the Baal HaTurim. So so again, we saw, why is the letter Chaf written small? Because the first is to tell us that Sarah, the sadness for Sarah was not as great as we might have thought, because she lived a full life. A second explanation, and also because it shows that the difference between Jacob and Sarah, their death was 20 years. A second answer is Inami Shahaita Kamo Goremet Mitata. A second reason why the Chaf was short was because Sarah caused her own death. Shahaita Kamo Goremet Mitata. It says, though she caused her own death. Why? Why did she cause her own death? Because Shemasra Din, because she had invoked judgments against Abraham, because she had said, because after Abraham had told her, she said to Abraham, take Hagar as a concubine. She goes to Abraham and she says, you've taken her and you're showing her too much favor. Yishpot Hashem beini ubeinecha. Let God judge between me and you. So whoever looks for judgment to be cast upon somebody else, therefore she was punished first. So the Talmud learns from here that somebody who asks for heaven to punish somebody else will actually be punished first. And also it's telling us, so since she caused her own death, therefore the eulogy for her was diminished, because she is the one who caused her own death, and for this reason the cries for her were less. That's what the Baal HaTurim says. So basically there's a dispute in the Talmud. Is the mourning for the purpose of giving honor to the deceased, or giving comfort to the mourners? So certain things that are done to give honor to the deceased, we don't do this if the person causes their own death. And so therefore, in this case, the mourning for Sarah was diminished. Okay, I see no questions about that. Okay, so it's a powerful, it's a interesting idea that they're trying to say. On the one hand, they said that she lived a full life. On the other hand, it said because she tried to get Abraham in trouble, she was punished first. Okay, then I see another, hold on. I see another idea that I wanted to share with you from the Baal HaTurim, and that is the following. It says that since we're talking about death, I wanted to share this with you. It says in chapter 23, verse 6, he says that the children of Chet answered Abraham, and they said to him, Shema'enu Adoni, listen, my master, Nisi Elokim, Ata v'tochenu, you are a prince of God amongst us. B'mivchar kivarenu, amongst the best places, our best graveyards, Kevoret Metecha, bury your dead in the best graveyards. We're going to give you prime location. Ish mimenu, each man from us amongst us, as Kivrel will not withhold a grave from you, Mikvor Metecha, from burying your dead, from burying your dead. So what does this mean? So the Talmud, so the Baal HaTurim has the following. Let me just say, it says, well, I want to just say one other thing first. It says in the previous verse, that Abram got up from before the dead, and he spoke to the people of Chet. Baal HaTurim teaches us a halacha here as it relates to death. He says, if there's a dead body, Rahman al lying in front of us, one is not allowed to have a private conversation. You're not allowed to speak when the dead body is in front of you, only as it relates directly to the dead. You cannot have any other conversations at that point out of respect. And then the Baal HaTurim says here, why does it say meitecha, bury your dead? So he points out that this word meitecha, there is a Masoretic note on it in the Codex, and the Masoretic note here is Gimel. There's Daled. There's a Masoretic note of Daled. It needs to say that this word meitecha appears 4 times in total in Tanakh, 3 times here, meaning twice in verse 6, where we just say Kvoret meitecha, and then again in verse 11, where it says Kevor meitecha, and then so basically in this passage it appears 3 times, and the expression "you're dead" only appears one other time in the whole Bible, and that is in Isaiah chapter 26, verse 19, and that's a very powerful phrase because there it says, Yechyu meitecha, your dead will live. Yechyu meitecha, your dead will come to life. So the Baal HaTurim points out that the 3 in this passage are spelled without a letter Yud, whereas the one in Isaiah is spelled with a letter Yud, because it's speaking in the plural, that the many dead will come to life. This is the concept. This is the concept of resurrection of the dead. And this says the Baal HaTurim. This says the Baal HaTurim. Yesh kan remez l'masha amru. This is a hint to which they say shemetei Eretz Yisrael chayim techila, that the dead of the land of Israel will be resurrected first. So this is a concept. I don't know if any of you have heard this. That when it comes time to the resurrection of the dead, that if you're buried in the land of Israel, you're going to be resurrected first. This is why some people have the custom. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this practice of being buried in Israel. People carry their bodies to be buried in Israel. That's a reference to like Jacob. But here is another concept here. And how does he derive it? Because here it says meitecha, and here it says you're dead, and there it says yichyu meitecha. And there it says your dead will live, meaning to say your dead from here will those who are buried here will resurrect those dead who are buried there. Meaning to say the dead from the land of Israel will then go and resurrect those who are buried outside the land of Israel. That'll be their job. So I guess we could understand this to mean symbolically that those who are buried in Israel, that those who live in Israel can be a light to the Jews outside, and they'll wake them up and resurrect us spiritually. That's at least the way I understand it. And those are the Baal Turims that I wanted to mention to you. And now I wanted to mention a few beautiful comments I saw from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I always love Lubavitcher. I always look to Lubavitcher Rebbe about a verse that I look for a deeper meaning. I always love his explanation. So here's what the Rebbe said on what's a very, I've always found this verse to be very rich. It says in chapter 24, verse 1, Avraham Zakein, and Avraham was old, Ba Bayamim. The phrase Ba Bayamim means he was coming in his days, which is, it makes no sense. What does that verse mean? And Hashem blessed Abraham with everything. God blessed Abraham with everything. But the phrase Ba Bayamim is a very strange phrase. So the Rebbe gives his own explanation for it. What does he say? And if I tell you his explanation, you're going to, I was shocked. I was shocked, and I think you might be shocked also. That's how insane this explanation was for me. And it takes the Rebbe to be able to say it. So first, let me read to you the way they translate this in the Chabad Torah, which is translation based upon the Rebbe's interpretation from it. So it says, he translates it as, even though Abraham was old, and maturity tends to breed benign nonchalance, Abraham continued to deeply internalize his experiences. That's how they translate it. That even though, you won't see this translation in your Chumash, even though Abraham was old, and usually when you're old, you become, whatever, I don't care anymore. Abraham continued Ba Bayamim, to deeply internalize his experiences. So what does that mean? And is that a good thing? Now, if I ask you the question, you can raise your hand or nod if you agree. Do you think it's a good thing to deeply internalize your experiences? What do you think? Do you think this is a good thing that Abraham was doing? He was deeply internalizing his experiences. What do you think? So, okay, hold on. So I would always think that you take something seriously, that's a sign of your spiritual greatness. But this is what the Rebbe writes. Physical aging is caused, i.e. facial wrinkles. That's what he writes. I don't know if I'm not going to comment on whether or not the Rebbe is actually scientifically correct here. Far be it from me to challenge him. But he says it's caused largely by allowing life's events to overly affect us. Normally, as people get older, they develop a certain detachment from the vicissitudes of life. But because Abraham continued to be deeply affected by events, the years took their tolls on him, and the effect became visible. So therefore, what the Torah is telling us here is that Avram was old because he continued to deeply internalize his experiences. Avram Zakein Ba Bayamim, because he took these experiences into his life. So this is what I found shocking. The Rebbe says we should take Abraham's attitude as an object lesson in how not to behave. That was what was shocking for me. He says we should not behave like Abraham. Of course, we should strive to emulate his care, to deeply internalize his experiences. But at the same time, we should trust in Hashem's protection and not take life's experiences so much to heart that they age us physically. Rebbe was saying, don't take these things internally so much so that they affect us physically. We have to know how to put these experiences in the world to the side so we don't allow them to overtake us. I was shocked when I read that. I thought we were supposed to take everything to heart so that we feel them physically. But the Rebbe takes a different approach to that. And then the Rebbe says about this, he says a little bit more. He says, according to the sages, this idiom to come with days, Baba Yamim, means, and here he's quoting the Zohar, means to have used all one's days for performing God's commandments. So the Rebbe asked the question, how can we say that he used all of his days to perform God's commandments when we know that until he was 75, he was raised as an idolater, and he only recognized God at a later point in his life. He wasn't raised in a yeshiva. He wasn't raised in a cheder. He was the first one, and he came to this later in life. So the Rebbe writes here, the answer is because Abraham's idol worship compelled him to seek the truth. And so therefore we could say he was able to use all of his days as part of his march toward the service of Hashem. So that's what the Rebbe says about Avram Zaken Baba Yamim. Don't internalize things to heart. And also the earlier aspects of our life should be something that pushes us in whatever way towards the goal of understanding Hashem. Then I wanted to take the comment I found next that was interesting was what the Rebbe says on chapter 24, verse 22. Now this chapter 24, verse 22, this is something that when we were studying yesterday with the Rashi, I found to be very, I found the Rashi to be difficult for me to understand. So I looked at the Rebbe to see if the Rebbe gave a deeper explanation for it. It says when this refers to the next passage in the discussion that when Abraham sends what desires, he wants to find a wife for his son Isaac. So he sends his servant, which the rabbis understand to be Eliezer, he sends his servant out to the area of Aram Naharaim to find a wife. And the servant, when he creates a test of how he's going to find a wife, he says, whoever, well, I'll ask for water for myself, and I'll also give water to my camels to drink. And then the servant sees that Rebecca is the one who does this. And he's so overjoyed when he sees that Rebecca is the one who does this, that it says in the verse 22, it says in chapter 24, verse 22, when the camels finished drinking, approximately over 300 gallons, because each camel drinks around 30 gallons, and there were 10 camels. So when the camels finished drinking, he was so excited. So the man took a gold nose ring, weighing a beka mishkalo. Rashi tells us that this beka is a half shekel. And also he took shneitz midim al yadah, and he also took 2 gold bracelets, and each of these gold bracelets weighed, or together they weighed 10 gold shekels, and he gave them for her arms. So shneitz midim al yadah asara zahav mishkalam. So it seems so random. Why is he giving her a nose ring that weighs a beka? And why is he giving her 2 bracelets that weigh 10 mishkalam, a weight of 10 shekel? So Rashi doesn't want to say that there's no symbolism or significance to these gifts. So Rashi tells us what the significance is. And at first glance, it's very strange, Rashi. He says the beka, the half shekel, is a hint to the half shekel that the Jews have to give every year to the temple. Rebecca's descendants are going to have to give a half shekel to the temple every year. And that's what the Eliezer was hinting to by giving her a half shekel. In addition to that, what's the significance of the 2 bracelets? They hint to the 2 tablets that Moshe got at Sinai, and Moshe broke at Sinai, and then he rewrote the 2 tablets. The 2 tablets that are connected, mitzumadot, which is like the word smidim, like bracelets. And what's the significance of it weighing 10? Remez la'aseret hadibros. And this hints to the 10 commandments which are on these 2 tablets. So, and I was thinking to myself yesterday, there has to be a deeper meaning behind this because of all the things, it seems so random. Why is he giving her two bracelets referring to the Ten Commandments? It seems that the connection there is so flimsy, and I didn't understand why Rashi felt it to be so important to connect these gifts to the Ten Commandments and to the half shekel. So whenever I see a Rashi that I don't understand, I try to turn to the Rebbe because the Rebbe is a beautiful commentary on Rashi. Of course, there are over 800 commentaries on Rashi. So there's a lot of places we could look, but I just like to go to the Rebbe because he speaks a language that American Jews can understand. So the Rebbe says as follows: a gold nose ring. This is what he says. He says Eliezer's gifts to Rebecca, the bride in the first marriage explicitly mentioned in the Torah. And Abraham and Sarah's marriage is not explicitly mentioned. So the first time that there was a marriage anywhere in the Torah is Rebecca and Isaac. This is the first marriage to be discussed. So the bride, so he gives her to Rebecca, he gives her the nose ring. So it alludes to, and also he gives her the bracelet. He gives her the ring and the bracelet. This alludes to two pillars. The nose ring is one of the pillars, and the bracelets are another pillar, which a Jewish home and a marriage must be founded. One is the fulfillment of the commandments, and two is study of the Torah. These are the two primary spiritual responsibilities of a Jew. One is to fulfill the commandments of God, and number two is to study the Torah. And that's what's being alluded to in these gifts. The half shekel, he gave her a ring that was worth a half shekel. This alludes to the mitzvah that the Jewish people had to give of giving a half shekel. That's the mitzvah of the donation of charity. So that's the Rebbe says that's the quintessential commandment is charity. It all starts with charity. And number two is the two bracelets. They allude to the Ten Commandments, upon which was engraved the Ten Commandments, which are the foundations of Torah. So it alludes to Torah study. So the hint is to Rebecca that you're going to be entering into a marriage which has these two pillars for it. Doing the commandments, symbolized by charity, and studying Torah, symbolized by the tablets. And then the Rebbe writes, the Ten Commandments is the only section of the Torah that was engraved upon the tablets. The rest of the Torah was written with ink on parchment. Letters remain on, when they are engraved on a tablet, they're an integral and cannot be separated from it. So by giving Rebecca a gift that alludes to the Ten Commandments, Eliezer was indicating that a Jewish home must be as committed to Torah, as intrinsic as an engraved letter is upon a stone. So that's what he was referring to. Okay, let me just pause for a second, see if anybody has any questions. Do I see any questions coming up? Okay, no questions. Okay, hold on one second. Let me see. Wanted to do one more comment from the Rebbe towards the end of this chapter, because actually I saw this on a YouTube short that there was an imam who his son, I assume it was his son, while he was driving, was asking him all sorts of questions about the Jewish faith. And he said, how many times do the Jews pray every day? And he said 3 times. And the imam said, and they pray the afternoon prayer, which they call mincha. They pray it because of the prophet Isaac. So that imam knew his stuff. He knew the rabbinic tradition that the prophet Isaac was the one who instituted the afternoon prayer. And I want to look at that source for that comment. It's based upon our portion in chapter 24, verse 63. But as Rebecca was being brought to Isaac, it says that Isaac Isaac went out to talk in the field towards the evening. And then he lifts up his eyes and he sees the camels are coming. But who is he talking to? Who is he talking to? Who is he talking to here? So Rashi says, Suach is an expression of prayer. Lashon tefillah, as Yishpoch Ticho, he pours forth his prayer. So Isaac was praying. Because otherwise, who is he talking to? So it says that Isaac went out in the field to daven, to pray. And the Talmud tells us here in Brachot 34b that Isaac had instituted the practice of praying in the afternoon. That's the afternoon prayer of Mincha. Now, really, up until now, says the Rebbe, based upon other commentaries, he says up until now he had prayed indoors because he didn't want to disrespectfully do more than his father. So therefore he was praying indoors. But when Abraham found out that Isaac was praying every afternoon, he adopted it as well. And so therefore the prayer for the afternoon was formally instituted. So what's the idea of praying in the afternoon? That's what I wanted to focus on, what we call the Mincha prayer. Mincha is the prayer I think gets the most short shrift. Everybody comes, the morning prayer, and people know you got to go to the morning minyan, or the evening prayer, as sometimes Kabbalat Shabbat, you have the evening prayers, people gather. The afternoon prayer, people try to chop a mincha. They try to catch a mincha while they're on the run. They pray in the street. They it's almost like a stepchild to the other prayers. So listen what the Rebbe says about it. We recite the morning prayer before beginning our day and the evening prayer after completing our day. In contrast, really the afternoon prayer, the mincha prayer, should really be considered like it's the holiest. These are my words, not the Rebbe's. Why? Because the mincha prayer requires us to stop what we're doing in the middle of our workday and pray in the middle of our regular daily activities. Meaning to say, it's the prayer that's really most integrated into the world. The other prayers are before and after our day. It's like we can be secluded, but the mincha prayer, there are office minyanim around town, around DC. People, for many years, there was one at the FTC. They had, I don't know if they still have it, they have a mincha minyan. So these places, these office buildings, they don't have a shachar minyan. They usually don't have a marav minyan, but they have a mincha minyan. It's the only prayer service, it's the prayer service which is the most integrated into the workday.
Rabbi,
and so, yes.
When I was at HUD, we had a mincha prayer.
The mincha prayer is the prayer that's most integrated into the workday, and so therefore, Isaac goes out into the field. The field is like our jobs. He's going out to pray while he's working. So that's the idea. So it means to say that the morning prayer is, okay, before we go out into the world every day, we have to pray. But the mincha prayer is, okay, how are we doing in the world? Are we properly integrating God into our life? And so for that reason, by stopping in the middle of their day to pray, we're demonstrating that we're fully committed to God. So in a certain sense, the mincha prayer is the biggest test of our relationship with God. Are we able to bring it from our own homes, from our own synagogues, from our own cloistered environments into the spiritual, into the mundane world? And that's the idea that Isaac went out to pray in the field. He took his prayer into the world at large. Okay, we'll stop here. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to address them.